We are profoundly grateful and truly honored to have Professor Dr. Ronak Jahan, the most distinguished and celebrated women academician of Bangladesh, a role model rather, currently an adjunct professor at the International Affairs and a senior researcher scholar at the Southern Asian Institute at the Columbia University, New York, whose forte is gender and the political sciences, and perhaps the first woman in post-independence Bangladesh to have served as chairperson of the Political Science Department of Dhaka University from 72 to 73 to 75. I especially welcome her and thank her for accepting our invitation. I thank all our distinguished panelists that are present here today, participating, including we have Mr. Abdul Ghaffar Chaudhry, the respected journalist and writer of the Amar Ekushe. We also have amongst our panelists, Dr. Sachi Dastidar, Dr. Nuzar Chaudhry, Professor Juan Di Giorgio Lutz, Professor Yasmin Sakia, and Professor Dr. Mizanur Rahman. Ladies and gentlemen, today is 25 March, the Bangladesh Genocide Day. In the history of Bengali liberation struggle that spans from 1947 for the next 23 years, culminating into our War of Liberation and our independence in 1971. 50 years ago, on this black night, Pakistan Armed Forces committed genocide on the civilian Bengalis on the soil of Bangladesh in the name of Operation Searchlight. The so-called annihilation operation was simultaneously launched in 7 cities of Bangladesh, including Dhaka, Chittagong, Khulna, Kumilla, Jessore, Rajshahi, Saidpur, Sylhet, etc. 3 million Bengali men and women were brutally killed, and more than 200,000 to 300,000 women were sexually violated, and a large number of the top Bengali intellectuals were blindfolded and murdered. On the occasion of the 50 years of Bangladesh genocide, I pay profound homage to the martyrs of 1971 genocide and express solidarity with the bereaved family members. There has not been a single family in Bangladesh that has not been affected by the 1971 genocide, including my own. On this solemn occasion, I pay my deep respects to the architect of our independence and father of our nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and who, after witnessing the atrocities committed on the civilian Bengalis by the Pakistan Armed Forces on 25 March 1971, declared the independence of Bangladesh on the early hours of 26 March 1971 and was arrested thereafter for the next 9 months of our War of Liberation. On this sobering occasion, I pay my homage to the 3 million martyrs and the valiant freedom fighters of 1971, many of whom lost their lives in the liberation struggles, while others, millions of innocent civilians, men, women, and children, were brutally killed by the Pakistan Armed Forces just because they were of Bengali ethnicity. Today, on the occasion of the 50 years of Bangladesh genocide, I also pay my highest respects to the more than 200,000 Bengali women and girls who were sexually violated, enslaved, and impregnated by the Pakistan Armed Forces during the 9 long months of our War of Liberation. One of the most heinous crimes against humanity and active genocide committed by the Pakistan Armed Forces with their collaborators, including Jamaat-e-Islami, Razakar, Al-Shams, Al-Badr, just 2 days before the Pakistani army surrendered to Bangladesh India Joint Command on 16 December, was to blindfold on 14 December and brush fire the top intellectuals of Bangladesh, Hindus and Muslims alike, to render the nation intellectless. These are unforgivable crimes that would fall under textbook definition of genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and even ethnic cleansing, for which Bangladesh or the families of the victims never received an apology, either from the perpetrators or from their collaborators. Due to mass atrocities and genocide committed, 10 million civilian Bengalis were forced to flee to Bangladesh in fear of their lives, and atrocities to the neighboring India, and were sheltered by the Indian government as refugees in 825 refugee camps. Allen Ginsberg, in his famous poem, Jessore Road in September, describes the helplessness and the massacre that went through the India-Bangladesh border, for which they had to flee in 1971, just like the Rohingyas had fled Myanmar's Rakhine state and came to Bangladesh in fear of their lives. I want to today just mention that, international media reactions right after the Bangladesh genocide was many. We saw that Daily Telegraph on March 29 published that no mercy in Pakistan fighting, where they described that, hundreds of civilians were reported to have been killed. Later on, again in Times UK, we saw on April 12th that Pakistan ran one to the west, in which they said that it's a veritable bloodbath. The troops have been utterly merciless. Estimates of the total dead about 300,000, and this is only in April. So in the next few months until December, the number went up to 3 million. And there are many, mentions of international books and documents, including the most mentionable one is journalist Anthony Mascarahan's publication in Sunday Times, Genocide. And he wrote that I have seen whole villages devastated by punitive action, etc. And he did ask that, how many did you get? One Pakistan Armed Forces answering other. And these are really, really horrifying experiences that he described. Many world leaders had reacted after the Bangladesh 1971 genocide, and I would particularly like to mention Prime Minister of India, Srimati Indira Gandhi, who said that India could not remain a silent spectator of events in East Pakistan. Senator Edward M. Kennedy, who was the chair of the Senate Humanitarian Committee at that time, after visiting the refugee camps, he also denounced Pakistan military's genocide, and he did mention that East Pakistani separatists' genocide, the word was genocide. Of course, he also commented on the secret trial of East Pakistani leader Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and said an outrage to every concept of international law. The only crime that Mujib is guilty of is winning an election. Of course, we have Gary J. Bass's book, The Blood Telegram, Nixon, Kissinger, and a Forgotten Genocide. There he clearly mentions, in the dark annals of modern cruelty, in ranks as bloodier than Bosnia, and by some accounts in the same rough league as Rwanda, was the Bangladesh genocide. At this point, I would like to particularly mention that, in recent times in the 20th century, there have been recognition of many of these genocides, including Rwanda, Bosnia, as well as Cambodia, with the UN administrator, which was a local trial. Bangladesh Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, as per her election promise in 2008, she had initiated and requested from the parliament to organize the Bangladesh International Crimes Tribunal, by which there was some solace for the family members of the victims of the 1971 genocide, even though it was, a symbolic kind of a trial, because we could not really try the Pakistan POWs or the 195 who was arrested for particularly war crimes and genocide. But this is absolutely true that since the World War, Second World War, and the Jewish Holocaust, Bangladesh genocide numbers are the highest. And there needs to be an international recognition. So today, when we speak, when we request, we've got such a distinguished panel, we would look forward to how the panel can reflect on after the keynote speech, where Dr. Raunak Jahan will be presenting her keynote speech, and I'm sure she'll be, she requested us that she wants to speak on the international recognition aspect, but we would also like to hear the international panelists and the members of the victim families, that what is it that they want, particularly whether an apology is still due, how can we, how can we internationalize this issue, how can we make more, disseminate more information, particularly in the United Kingdom. That's why we're organizing this particular seminar at the Bangladesh High Commission London, because we know there's an all-party parliamentary group. In UK, we did invite the chair, but they couldn't participate today because, today is Thursday. It's very difficult in Parliament to participate today, but next year we will do it in a befitting manner, and we will involve the all-party parliamentary group and other activists of Holocaust who are here. So today we could not, but we would like to hear that how can we attain more international recognition for our 1971 genocide? What kind of compensations can the families get? What kind of apologies can they expect? Or how can we actually even get one? With these words, I would like to request now that we have Professor Dr. Raunak Jahan. I would like to request her to present her paper. I already introduced her. I don't want to say any more. I would like to straightaway request her to present her keynote paper. You have the floor, madam.
Thank you very much, High Commissioner. And I first of all would like to thank the High Commission for co-sponsoring this event with Dhaka University Center for Genocide Studies. I have been going to the Dhaka University Center for the last few years when yeah, Professor Imtiaz has every year he organizes this event, and I make it a point to participate for various reasons, but mainly two reasons. One is I think it is very important that we should have a center like this in our universities, because research by independent academics on this particular topic would bring some clarity and also international recognition uh, for this crime. And secondly, I think it's also very important that our students, get involved in this, so that I think keeping up this memory through the students is very important, and teaching them. So but this is the first time that I'm attending a event organized by a high commission or the embassy on the event. And I think it is again very important that our foreign office and diplomats now get involved, mainly because if we want to get international recognition, then they also have a very important role to play. So I would like to now appreciate the effort of the British High Commission, our High Commission in London. Let me, before I go, I propose to Imtiaz that this is the topic I want to talk about, because I have spent many years abroad, and what I myself have witnessed the genocide. And so for somebody like me, then to be in a situation where we find that gradually people are forgetting about what happened in Bangladesh is very painful. So that this has been for many, many years my own personal goal, that we do something about this, get this international recognition. But I will begin by just giving my own personal experience of that particular night, because I remember in the last seminar, our High Commissioner mentioned that in 71 she was quite young at that time, and I think there could be some amongst the participants who were not even born. But I was in 71, I had just come back from America and joined Dhaka University. And I remember that night very clearly, because our house was very close to both Dhaka University and also what was then known as Pilkhana, where the EPR, what was the Pakistan Rifles office was. And yes, from midnight on, we heard all the shelling, then all the Babupura Bosti, which was a slum, that was torched. People were crying. In Newmarket area was also, there was shooting. But so we saw all of that with our own eyes. And because all of March, we thought that we are independent. And suddenly, overnight, to see this change, that was, and early in the morning, two things that are very clear in my mind. For the first time in my life, I saw a tank, and that we have not seen before. And then the Pakistani army were announcing that unless we bring down our flags, we had both the Bangladesh flag and then the black flag, that then the house would be razed to ground. And to hear this kind of statement, that was, I mean, beyond belief. Anyway, I was in Bangladesh almost up to October. And then my professors at Harvard offered me a teaching position, and I went back there. But I remember that we saw people being picked up. We heard about that. Many of the participants might have read Jahanara Imam's book, and their house was very close to our house. And that night that Rumi was picked up, and the whole area was cordoned off. Some of my colleagues at Dhaka University were also asked to go to cantonment for interrogation. So all of this we saw, and then from around August and September, we started hearing about what is happening to women, which we didn't hear before. So for somebody like me who has seen it, who has talked to many people in 71, then that for us, we thought that we always used to say that it is a genocide, for instance, and of course, Johir Raihan's famous film. And then what later, much later, when I was asked many years ago to write about Bangladesh genocide, then that's the first time that was the most difficult writing I had to do. In 1995, I was asked by Professor Samuel Totten, who was editing a book on Bangladesh, on a century of genocide. And though I was not doing research on genocide, but as soon as somebody asked me to do it, then I said yes, because I thought it is an opportunity for me to now write on Bangladesh, which will be an international collection, because that is something that is very much lacking. And then I found that there are just so many definitional problems that there is a very strict definition about what is a genocide, what is a crimes against humanity, what is a war crime, what is an ethnic cleansing. So that I was given so many questions that I have to really, through my writing, I have to answer and prove that it is a genocide. And because there is a definition in the UN Convention that a genocide has to be, it is committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. And then the crimes are killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about physical destruction. So that I had to, and there are some others. So I had to then really select examples so that all of these charges and what happened in Bangladesh will fit. So of course, in terms of targeted, then it was I argued that it was targeted against the Hindus, for instance, as a group. It was targeted against the youth and also the nationalists, particularly the Awami League. Then the police and the army people who were fighting. So that one had to prove that certain groups were targeted, for instance. And then the kinds of things that they were doing, and that it has to fit those definitions. And then after that, referencing was very important. Just because I saw, or that has to be all this for so that whatever the journalists wrote in 71, 72, that was very, very important to then document that. So every word, then I had to document from where I got that and whether it is authentic enough. And so that, in fact, what happened in Bangladesh, I could see that it was not only genocide, but also crimes against humanity, because civilians were also affected. It was also war crimes. But I think for the genocide part, I had to really then have to prove that it was targeted against to annihilate in part or whole a particular group, and also then that there was some kind of a racial or a group animosity. So what was helpful for me at that time, that Ayub Khan's autobiography, Friends Not Masters, he has a quote where he was writing in a very denigrating way that Bengalis are this kind of a race and they suffer from this kinds of mentality. So which shows that how the Pakistanis were actually looking at us in this in a very racial way. So the point is that when we what has been lacking in Bangladesh is this, that we have to very carefully document all of this so that it fits because it into these various charges that we can bring, and then giving all of these references. And then also they asked that I have to give, I must include oral testimonies. Eyewitness accounts are very important. So at that time, because I was writing in 95, for instance, there are many more, but only a few, and also only in Bengali there were eyewitness accounts. So I used this Rashid Haidar's book, Bhayabaho Abhiggata, and then translated it, and giving examples of, one was of course a very famous example that we know, and there is even a video which must be preserved, what happened in Jagannath Hall, for instance, that there you just see that the students were targeted and they were just be getting killed. And then also what happened against women. So that various charges, then having eyewitness accounts, I thought, that was also, very, very important. Now, going back to this question of, and I'm happy to note that even though I had to revise it and give so many examples, I mean, every word that I had to defend, I never had to defend my writing so much as I had to defend that particular article, but I decided I must stay with this. So anyway, that was accepted. And so this is now, that book in 96 was a century of genocide, and that was for 20th century. Now they have expanded it as centuries of genocide, which is for 3 centuries, and they have added some more, dropped some, like Indonesia was dropped. Fortunately, Bangladesh is still there, and it is in the 4th edition with Rutledge. But what I want to now talk about is the world response and recognition. We all know that when the first, between 72 to 75, until Bangabandhu was in power, the government was committed, and we intended to bring, to try the war. That was a major issue. And we also know that, in reality, then it was even, it is sad, but it is true that even though there is a lot of international public support for Bangladesh genocide during 71, but when we declared our intention to try, then we really could not get enough support from the governments, various governments behind us. And there was a lot of pressure on us that, no, we should not push for war crimes trials. And we also didn't have that many chips in our hand, 250,000 stranded Bangladeshis, Bengalis were in Pakistan, and we had to also bring them back. So we had to come to some kind of an accommodation, but Pakistan did agree at that time that they will try these 195 people, which they didn't do. But at that time, I think we did set up this ICTA in 1973. And then also we were trying to then have the Collaborators Act, and we were arresting, investigating, which were for the domestic collaborators. And then when the Bangabandhu was assassinated and Zia Rahman took over power, then the Collaborators Act was abandoned at that time. So that whole collaborators trial, sort of that stopped. But fortunately, this ICTA, that act was never repealed, which then finally, when Sheikh Hasina came to power in 2009, then she reactivated that. And then even though it is a domestic court, but it can try international for international crimes. So now very quickly then a couple of points I want to make. First is that even though the regimes from 75 up to 1990, they were they got the support of the collaborators, and that was one of the main support group. They were not at all, they were not committed to war crimes trials. But people, it is, wanted that trial. And that is why after 1990, both Ghatak Dalal Nirmul Committee and then the Liberation War Museum, these started with civil society, non-state actors, because they wanted this trial, and they managed to get traction for that, because people didn't forget sort of this, this was a very popular cause. And then in 2007 and 8, the sector commanders group also then got into this. So now for international, to how do we bring back again international effort or recognition? I think that for that, we need to work in various fronts. First of all, now I think if the government wants, then they could ask our our various embassies to play much more of a proactive role. Then I think we need to involve a lot of academic institutions globally and very well-known scholars to be involved into this. Because I remember years later, suddenly I got a call from a young man who was a graduate student at Harvard and who took Samantha Power's course. And then from that Samantha Power's course, he realized that, because she mentions in her book just a little about Bangladesh genocide. And he is a Indian Bengali origin, but American. So he sort of discovered that, then he got very interested to start some campaign, because the Armenian campaign was happening after so many years. And he thought, no matter how many years later, we can also start again a campaign and lobby the US Congress. Here also, I think the Bangladeshi community in various countries in the West, I think they can play a very important role, the same way that they lobbied during 1971 for our National Liberation War, that if they want, they can lobby on this. One of the problems I see with the Bangladeshi community organizations, at least I don't know about UK, but I've seen it in America, that unfortunately they are divided in various groups, and they are so involved in their own little group fights that they cannot make common cause for some bigger issue where they would all come together. So I think this is where it will be important and now I think we have a new generation of Bangladeshis who are not who are born American or who have been born British, and I think they can probably rise above these kinds of little groupings, and they can come together on this one common cause. The other part that I find that we in Bangladesh have failed to do is that in 1994, when I went to Cambodia, then I found that in Cambodia, of course, economy was really devastated, and they have. But I found with what care they kept their genocide museums with all kinds of details. And when I thought, my goodness, in Bangladesh, we don't have that kind of a memorial where every sort of these skulls and this and that, there is just so many things. I mean, I don't know what prevents us that every sort of upazila, we can have like the Shohid Minar, we can have a memorial where people still remember who were killed, at least the names. If we can put these names of people who were killed, then I think that would be very, very important. The one final comment I want to make is that we thought when we started these trials that we will get a lot of international support. But I think one group from which we are not getting as much support as we like is a lot of international human rights activists internationally, because they are against capital punishment. And on that ground, I think there is a problem because our laws keep capital punishment. So I think we have to think about this, because that is one group who would be the first ones internationally who would be supporting us. And they say, yes, we support you, but you have this capital punishment. So I think this is something on who we need to discuss amongst ourselves, to that how we would proceed if we want to get international recognition on this. So these are some of my very disjointed thoughts. Sorry, Haikavashinath, that I'm not all that well prepared today, but I'm looking forward to listening to many of the commentators that you have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, the very distinguished fellow and visiting fellow of Columbia University, Professor Dr. Ronak Jahan. It was a great pleasure listening to you, particularly your academic works, your writings, your books and publications are world famous. The fact that you're focusing on this issue in Bangladesh. And currently, when we were listening to Professor Rehman Subhan at SOAS, you mentioned that you are compiling something on Bangladesh Liberation War and this particular aspect, and we look forward to publication. But the fact that in 1996, a century of genocide, a scholarly article by you is already accepted is a great start. And we look forward to some of the recommendations that you've given. Are extremely worthy recommendations, and you have rightly pointed out that we need a national unity, but also globally we need an academics, internationally young generation, internationally recognized, international lawyers perhaps who can take up the issue, guided by senior scholars like you who have done ample research on this. I really want to express our gratitude to you for coming here today, and I want to recognize one aspect of which I forgot to mention. If you look at the at the back, there's a Stop Genocide sign. This particular poster is from the Recognized Bangladesh rally at the Trafalgar Square on Sunday, August 1st, 1971 at 2 p.m. Action Bangladesh, 34 Stratford Villas. And this is the overseas freedom movement led by the Bengali British people during 1971 war. And this particular Stop Genocide, you get many photographs of it where at the Trafalgar Square, in front of the Westminster, at Hyde Park, where Bengali British people who are extremely patriotic, and today there are many of them there, and I would like to especially recognize them and thank them for joining us. They played such a important role and a significant role, where many British politicians also joined this. So there are many British politicians who are aware of this. It's just that, we need to organize more seminars and talk about it and have publications, like you said, which we don't have. So I want to recognize here the contributions of Bengali British politicians, Bengali British community and diaspora, who played an integral role in creating, mobilizing international opinion in recognition of Bangladesh, but at the same time also recognition of the genocide that was going on in Bangladesh. With these words, I think at this point we had a documentary. I think for our foreign participants and the panelists, for their benefit, I would request that this is just a 3-minute documentary we'd like to play on the bar. And we are grateful to the Center for Genocide Studies for preparing this documentary. It's a very nice documentary, well made.
Bangladesh is hauntingly familiar with the phenomenon of genocide. In 1971, the Pakistan Army committed one of the worst genocides in modern history in the erstwhile eastern wing of Pakistan, which is currently Bangladesh. 50 years ago, on 25 March 1971, the genocide began with Operation Searchlight, with the Pakistan Armed Forces attacking the civilian Bengalis. The genocide, along with war crimes, continued for the next 9 months until 16 December 1971, when the Pakistan Armed Forces surrendered to the Joint Command Forces of Bangladesh and India, marking victory for Bangladesh. As many as 3 million people were killed, thousands of women and girls were raped, and some 10 million people were displaced and had to flee the country. The whole country witnessed the bloodbath brought forth by the Pakistan Army, but the University of Dhaka was the epicenter of the genocide. It is the only university in the entire world to have witnessed and survived a genocide. The symbolic value of this epicenter was the historic Bottola, located in front of the arts building of the university. The banyan tree was the focal point of mass uprisings against the Ayub Khan regime, and it was the first place to hoist the national flag of Bangladesh. So even a tree was the victim of the Pakistani military, who uprooted it on 25 March 1971. Apart from the Bottola, many of the places of the university were attacked, where people were killed in cold blood. Kala Bhavan, or the Arts Building, Dhaka University Teachers Club, Shohid Sergeant Johurul Haq Hall, erstwhile Iqbal Hall, Fuller Road Teachers Quarter, British Council Building, Solimullah Muslim Hall, Isha Khan Road Residential Area, Central Shohid Minar and Amtola, Fazlul Haq Muslim Hall, Jagannath Hall, Shamsun Nahar Hall, Shivbari Temple, Ramna Kali Mandir, Madhur Canteen, Rokeya Hall, and Nilkhet.
This slightly blurry amateur videotape, which has been kept hidden for the past 9 months, shows Pakistani soldiers executing students, professors, and workers at the University of Dhaka last March 26th. The first sequence shows Pakistani soldiers forcing students to carry and pile up the bodies of victims already killed.
The bloodbath of 25 March 1971 and the subsequent atrocities in the then East Pakistan prompted the erstwhile US Consul General Archer K. Blood to term this as a genocide. Full horror of Pak military atrocities will come to light sooner or later, he wrote to the Department of State in a dissent cable, headed as Selective Genocide. During the last stages of the Liberation War, sensing the imminent defeat, Pakistani top generals, along with their Bengal collaborators, made an elaborative master plan to eliminate the intellectuals who supported the independence movement of Bangladesh. Just before the victory of Bangladesh, on 14 December 1971, with the help of these Bengali collaborators, Rajakars, Al-Badr, and Ashams, the Pakistani army stormed the university and brutally killed many teachers and staff. The notorious killing squad, Al-Badr in particular, abducted the venerable professors, some of whose bodies were found in the Mirpur and Mohammadpur area later, whereas some other bodies were never found. The victory of the country was gained on 16 December 1971. Bangladesh Parliament has declared 25 March as Genocide Remembrance Day in 2017, with the objective of highlighting the atrocities and committing the country to work relentlessly to put an end to genocide once and for all in this world. On this solemn occasion of the 50th Genocide Memorial Day of Bangladesh, we pay our indebted homage to those who sacrificed their lives for ensuring an emancipatory future for all. May the golden jubilee of the independence of this country bring forward lasting peace upon a world free from genocides.
Sorry, a little bit of time in unmuting. Thank you, Center for Genocide. Before I hand over the floor now to Professor Imtiaz Ahmed, from the High Commission, we want to dedicate one little poem, Obhishap Dichi by Kavi Shamsur Rahman. This is a poem written by this great poet on the genocide, and one of our officers, Diwan Mahmood al-Haq, will recite it. If you please bear with us.
Thank you, Excellency, for allowing me to read this poem on this occasion. Obhishap Dichi, Shamsur Rahman. In English, I Cars by Shamsur Rahman. No, I did not appear from the burnt pages of the Old Testament, nor have I come from the grasses, but standing on the blood-stained soil of my motherland, on this very day, I Cars, those who gifted us the darkest of the nights of death, in millions, brutally killing our parents, grandparents, siblings, children, our dearest and nearest ones, who unleashed the bullets and bayonets of massacres in our villages, forests, farms, fields, and valleys everywhere, who monstrously flooded the streams of blood in rivers, and had me flee for the fear of my life, trampling thousands of decomposed bodies of my own ancestors. I curse today those dracons and hyenas. Now, আমি আসিনি ওল্ড টেস্টামেন্টের প্রাচীন পাতা পুড়ে দুর্বাসাও নই, তবু আজ এই রক্ত গধূলিতে দাঁড়িয়ে অভিশাপ দিচ্ছি আমাদের বুকের ভেতর যারা ভয়ানক কৃষ্ণপক্ষ দিয়েছিল সেটে, মগজেরই কোষে কোষে যারা পুঁতেছিল আমাদের আপন জনের লাশ, দগ্ধ, রক্তাপ্লুত, যারা গণহত্যা করেছে শহরে, গ্রামে, টিলায়, নদীতে, ক্ষেত ও খামারে, আমি অভিশাপ দিচ্ছি নেকড়ের চেয়েও অধিক পশু সেই সব পশুদের, killing them with a single piece of bullet in the firing squad and consoling the ever-gripping wounded hearts of millions shall never be acceptable to me, ever. ফায়ারিং স্কোয়াডে ওদের সারিবদ্ধ দাঁড় করিয়ে নিমেষেই ঝাঁ ঝাঁ বুলেটের বৃষ্টি ছড়ালেই সব চুকে বুকে যাবে, তা আমি মানব না। সব ভেবে তারা পার্কে, মাঠে, ক্যাম্পাসে, বাজারে বিষাক্ত গ্যাসের মতো মৃত্যুর বিভৎস গন্ধ দিয়েছে ছড়িয়ে। আমি তো তাদের জন্য অমন সহজ মৃত্যু করি না কামনা। আমাকে করেছে বাধ্য যারা আমার জনক জননীর রক্তে পা ডুবিয়ে দ্রুত সিঁড়ি ভেঙে পালাতে, হাসতে নদীতে, আর শয্যা পেতে নিতে বনেও বাদারে। আমি অভিশাপ দিচ্ছি আজ সেই দজ্জালদের, অভিশাপ দিচ্ছি ওরা চিরদিন বিশীর্ণ গলায় নিয়ত বয়ে বেড়াক গলিত নাছোড় মৃতদেহ। অভিশাপ দিচ্ছি প্রত্যহ দিনের শেষে ওরা হাঁটু মুড়ে এক টুকনো শুকনো রুটি চাইবে ব্যাকুল, কিন্তু রুটি প্রসারিত থাবা থেকে 10 হাত দূরে রবে সর্বদা। অভিশাপ দিচ্ছি ওদের তৃষ্ণায় পান পাত্র প্রতিবার কানায় কানায় রক্তে উঠবে ভরে, যে রক্ত বাংলায় বইয়ে দিয়েছে ওরা হিংস্র জানোয়ারের মতো। অভিশাপ দিচ্ছি আকণ্ঠ বিষ্ঠায় ডুবে ওরা অধীর চাইবে ত্রাণ, অথচ ওদের দিকে কেউ দেবে না ছুঁড়ে এক খণ্ড দড়ি। I curse they shall hanker after a little bit of care, but their own children shall stay away in sheer abhorrence. I curse that their coffee mugs shall ever remain fulfilled in bloods, which they have flooded in rivers on my soils of golden Bengal. অভিশাপ দিচ্ছি স্নেহের কাঙাল হয়ে ওরা খেপার মতো ঘুরবে এপাড়া ওপাড়া, নিজেরই সন্তান ঘৃণায় ফিরিয়ে নেবে মুখ, ফিরতে পারবে না কখনো। অভিশাপ দিচ্ছি এতটুকু আশ্রয়ের জন্য, বিশ্রামের কাছে আত্মসমর্পণের জন্য ওরা দাঁড়ে দাঁড়ে ঘুরবে। প্রেতায়িত সেই সব মুখের ওপর দ্রুত বন্ধ হয়ে যাবে পৃথিবীর প্রতিটি কপাট। অভিশাপ দিচ্ছি, অভিশাপ দিচ্ছি, অভিশাপ দিচ্ছি।
Thank you very much, Dewan Mahmudul Haq. I would like just to mention that, I would like to recognize that our former Foreign Secretary for 7 years and our former boss, Senior Secretary, Mr. Muhammad Shahidul Haq, is present amongst us, and I'd like to specially welcome you, sir, in our program. And also we have DG IMSO, Mr. Captain Muin, who's an international civil servant and heads the IMSO, International Maritime Settlement Organization. He's joined us. And we also have Murad Qureshi, councillor from Greater London Authority. So thank you very much for joining us, and many others who've joined. I'd like to recognize Mr. Sultan Mahmood Sharif, who will be speaking later on as a discussant also, who's joined us. So please bear with us. With these words, I'd like to hand over the floor to Professor Imtiaz Ahmed, who's the Director for Center for Genocide Studies, University of Dhaka, and also an international relations, a professor at the International Relations Department of the Bangladesh. He doesn't need any introduction, but I know that he has written wonderful books on women's studies, apart from international relations, and also environmental philosophy, and done quite a bit of international conferences here in London at the UCL on the Rohingya genocide case. So I would request Professor Imtiaz Ahmed to take the floor and moderate this discussion.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
Professor Ahmed, I think you're having a bit of connectivity problem. Perhaps the internet.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me? No.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. I was just saying that every chaos creates or crisis creates an opportunity. With the pandemic, I guess now the webinar becoming the new normal. I guess we have this opportunity, extraordinary opportunity of getting extraordinary scholars today. And I'm myself, I'm very keen to listen to all of you. Now, 25th March 1971 is very personal to me. I was a class 9 student, but I witnessed a genocide. I left my parents and went to Agartala, India, I literally slept on the pavement, and saw the refugees that the High Commissioner was referring to, and also Professor Anand Jahan, 10 million refugees. And that tells you, if you take the definition of genocide, if you just take conditions of life as one of the factor of genocide, then 10 million refugees itself can be an evidence as to what happened in 71 and why 1971 genocide is a genocide. People have some ideas that in genocide you have to have the number of killing has to be very high. I'm sure those who speak that way have no understanding of what the word genocide is all about. You and I cannot redefine genocide. It is legally codified, internationally accepted definition, and you can actually have a genocide without killing. Literally, it's conditions of life, bodily harm, mentally harm. Even if you separate children from parents, that also can be genocidal. And for that reason, I see no reason why 71 should not be regarded as genocide. And I think Professor Jahan has already pointed out that it is the issue, the key issue is intent to destroy in whole or in part in four categories of people. Now, Dhaka University has always been referred to as the epicenter of genocide, and that's precisely the reason why we have a Center for Genocide Studies. This is the first of its kind in South Asia. There are Center for Genocide in the Western world, but not in South Asia. This was the first, got established 7 years back. But I make the point that every university, particularly in Bangladesh, ought to have a Center for Genocide Studies, mainly for pushing research. Without research and without a solid scientific evidence and publication, I'm afraid a lot of people will not be convinced. So it's very important. But more important as to why we talk about research and why we talk about genocide research, or why we talk about genocide, or why we are having today's discussion. And I go back in a statement from Nobel laureate Desmond Tutu to give you a sense that why we need to discuss genocide. And let me quote Desmond Tutu on this. And this is what he says: the compelling reason why we should learn about the Holocaust and the genocides committed against other peoples as well is so that we might be filled with the revulsion at what took place, and thus be inspired, indeed galvanized, to commit ourselves to ensure that such atrocities should never happen again. Unquote. Many years back, I said the same thing in a presentation in Pakistan to my Pakistani friends that look, you don't have to do genocide trial for Bangladesh. You have to do the genocide trial for yourself, because you cannot have people sitting beside you who have done unlawful killing. That's the point. Killing children, killing women is an unlawful act. You literally have killers and murderers. This is precisely what I said way back, though, and I still stick to that. That I'm sure the new generation in Pakistan, I have a good number of friends of Pakistan, inside Pakistan, outside Pakistan. They understand very well, but however, the state is still, the mindset still not there. The trial has to be done. Of course, we want the trial to be there, particularly to catch the perpetrators. But more importantly, I think Pakistan ought to get into this issue very seriously. The general population, the serious researchers that they have, the extraordinary scholars they have to team up and say to their government that a genocide has taken place. Let us, take that seriously and do whatever that is wrong. I'm not going to speak at all because any further, because we have extraordinary speakers lined up. And let me now have the honor to invite the first speaker, Mr. Abdul Ghaffar Chaudhry. He is well known in the Bangladeshi community and, of course, in Bangladesh. A Bangladeshi-born British writer, journalist, columnist, political analyst, a poet. More importantly, he is known for an extraordinary song that he wrote, Amar Bhayer Rokte Rangano. This is the song that is played on 21st February, which is now the International Language Day. And Mr. Abdul Ghaffar Chaudhry must have been quite young at that time, but the spirit that he showed in that particular lyric is so important that even now, we sing that song. When we sing that song, we are moved. With that small intro, let me introduce.
Professor, Mr. Abdul Ghaffar Chaudhry was here with us, but he said he's fine in 20 minutes, so we can ask Professor Sachi to speak.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. Thank you, Muna. Let me now then invite the second speaker. We have Professor Dr. Sachi Dastidar. Dr. Dastidar is professor at the Department of Politics, Economics, and Law, the State University of New York College. His publications is well known. He's well known in the South Asian Circle. He established, South Asian Forum. Not to mention, he also is the editor of South Asian Forum Quarterly, and is well known in this part of the world. Professor Dastadir, the platform is yours.
Thank you. Can I also have the ability to share the screen, because I want to share a few slides later on. But let me first share what I have to say, then just a few slides I have, which I will come back in a few seconds. Let me first wish two Shubha Janmadin, so happy birthdays to Bangladesh, and Pranam as well to Bangabandhu. Our Partition Center has celebrated his centennial at our annual conference in October, and the nation's triumph rising from the genocide. I thank Bangladesh Embassy, called High Commission of UK and Ireland, Her Excellency Tasneem, the Ambassador or High Commissioner, for organizing this very important event. Thank you, First Secretary Hawk. It is great to see Dr. Momen and Dr. Jahan after a long time. I like the word embassy and ambassador than the colonial words, as my Didima and grandma and grandpa, two mama uncles, spent years and years in British prison for their activism for India's independence in Foripur and Dhaka now in Bangladesh, and Kolkata, now in West Bengal. It brings to my memory how Bangabandhu and other freedom lovers spent time in Pakistani prison for Bangladesh independence and not accept Pakistani symbolism. I feel passionately about this issue of non-recognition of Bengali genocide. It feels like Bengali lives don't matter. I know people who lost lives and cleansed in 1971. For me, there are layers within this genocide. Within Bengali genocide, I believe there was a Hindu extermination campaign by Pakistan military and their Bengali allies. There was an extermination campaign of Bengali Muslim intelligentsia. There was an attempt for extermination of secular Muslims and non-Muslims, and there was an attempt to destroy the pro-independence Awami League. This is not that different from Nazism, where not only Jews, but also gypsies, disabled, socialists, homosexuals were exterminated, and all fought to recognize that. I also believe that unless we are able to prosecute the genocide and bring murderers to justice, instability in Bangladesh, an attack on Hindu minority and secular Muslims like Bangabandhu and his family, and later Mrs. Wajed, may continue. I hope not. Thus, I fully support trial of war criminals and Prime Minister Wajed's government. Dhanyabad, thanks, Pranam Janai, and bravo. Next, the genocide in Bangladesh is unparalleled in human history. Whenever I get a chance, I express my feeling openly. When an American politician protected a mass murderer, I protested. I understand he called a civil rights group to say that he won't support the killers anymore. When a noted Washington DC think tank invited a Hindu named woman to promote Pakistani mass murderers' innocence, I protested by phone and in writing. They wrote me back apologizing, but didn't invite secularists yet. Twice I reminded this during congressional hearings. I was a speaker there. I'm pleased to say that after the second hearing, the few days before the current administration came to power in Bangladesh, they followed most of my recommendations. I still cannot believe 3 million people killed and 250,000 girls and mothers abused, and people world cannot call it a genocide. This is sad, this is bad, and this is unacceptable. After Jagannath Hall massacre on the first day, 3 million more were killed only 9 months, a very high per day killing rate. Yet no Pakistani was tried. Pakistan, Muslim majority nations, UK, Canada, and the US gave asylum to murderers. Why not? Why non-Bangladeshis complain? Why Bangladeshi Indian Hindus who ran 2 states in India didn't mobilize? Why American activists are not protesting? I wonder. On a related issue, let me thank the first Awami government when they replied to my request in 1996 to repair the 350-year-old Mahilara Mott in Borishal, where we later built a school in 2001 named after my mother and mother-in-law. Killers wouldn't have allowed that. And just this month, we repaired our 15th century Sri Vishnumurti in Borishal. I'm trying to recover my wife's family's Vishnumurti of Mahilara that is not now kept in Borishal. I understand a Hindu civil rights group in America has asked US President to recognize the genocide. Hindu America Foundation memorialized the genocide 2 days ago. I learned that many US representatives have wrote statements for congressional record. All of you can check. After waiting 50 years, I strongly believe that we need a coalition of Bangladeshis, Americans, Europeans, Indians, Muslims and Hindus, Buddhists and Christians, refugees in India and asylum seekers in America, secularists and devotees to join hands to defeat this pro-genocide camp. For me, if any of these groups push genocide recognition alone, it will be fine. We shouldn't wait for another 50 years. Indian subcontinent partition documentary project that I had, where I'm speaking from, project supports this project cause as our own. Let me quickly go through a few slides covering such a vast world neglected issue, but more importantly, censored by Pakistan, Islamist, world press, Muslim majority nations, and the democratic West. Joy Bangla and Namaskar. So let me go quickly to the few slides that I have. And let me share the screen because we don't have much time. So let me go. I hope you are able to see this. So let me start
Yes.
with the top one. This title, of course. We want this Bangladesh to be this beautiful, which it is, the red flower that we have. Now, this is the Jagannath Hall, where most of the pictures are taken by me. And you saw the YouTube video slightly before, where you will see how they were killing people. They said there are a few samples only. I have hundreds of these slides. This is recently Bengali Marwari hacked to death in 71 in North Bengal. Dead bodies of the Muslim intellectual killed by Pakistan Army on December 14. The next one is 100 Hindu priests, nuns, devotees burned alive in 1971 at Ramna Kali Mandir and Ma Anandamayi Ashram in Dhaka, destroyed by the genocidal army. I went to Chittagong and stayed in Pravartak Sangha. Sorry, let me go quickly. Sorry. Sorry, 1 second. It's okay. So I stayed in Pravartak Sangha ashram one time in Chittagong, and then I found this tablet. 15 people were killed, 13 Hindu men, 1 Hindu man, Muslim man, and 1 Hindu woman. Hardly anybody knows. Then this genocide. This is what Pakistan government's Hamidur Commission report. The Niazi, the murderer Niazi, had called for extermination. So he was asked, and of course he denied the allegation that he ever ordered. Why would they ask the question if he didn't say that? Faridpur, this is from New York Times. They said 10,000 Hindus were killed one day, and then and in Bodaiganj, 300 Hindus were killed. Yet we do have no consciousness. One of our ministers had very proud that he killed 5 Hindus and 1 Muslim. Organization Islamic countries almost elected somebody who was very proud that he killed 5 Hindus and on 13th April 1971. And Time magazine also is saying that Muslim soldiers to Pakistan, took away the lungi, and they were checking if they're Muslims. If not, he was usually mentioned. And it is the most, they're writing, it's the most incredible calculated thing since the days of Poland. This is what we need to explain. And then Bondabari, 300 Hindus sought shelter at the Archbishop's place, and the Archbishop Ganguly gave away them, and 85 of them are murdered. I personally think Ganguly should have been held responsible too. There are a few stories there. This is a story of Dhirandana Datta and his son who never was found, and this is their daughter's granddaughter testimony that we have. If you go to YouTube, we have hundreds of testimony from 47 to 71 and onwards. This is Aruma Datta. Then I have written about this, Ei Bangla, Oi Bangla, Ei Amar Desh. I started writing after going to Bangladesh. There is a chapter in Ei Bangla, Oi Bangla called Banglar Amnesia, Amader Amnesia, our amnesia, Sritilob Badhit Pratikar Darkar. We need a cure for our disease of forgetting. So anyway, Empire's Last Casualty does document it starts from 47, but 71, we have almost 130 pages of documentation. I couldn't do it, and this only where we could recognize it. There was citation. If people just said it, we couldn't do it. And then I wrote this. I have many books. The Mukti, Freely Born Again. This is a narrative of people who survived, but under what condition. Also, the hypocrisy of the Bangladeshi Indian, we call Bangal in India, who ran West Bengal and Tripura, yet they didn't do anything to help stop this genocide or document these people. There are other books, A. Amar Desh and Aces in Economics and Society. There are a couple of chapters, not all chapters there. And then this is a documentation of that. And then there is if you YouTube, you will get many testimony of the people. On the left, you probably know, she is Durga Ghosh, daughter of Madhu Babu, who was 6 members of the family was killed in Dhaka University. And on the right is somebody who nobody knows. We interviewed, it's on YouTube. You'll find Shakhi Gopal and Chaya Shaha. 25 members of the extended family were killed. They ran from one district to another district to another district. In this process, they were killed. This is on the left. Dr. Shapon Gayan is a professor in New York. How his family, they almost got wiped out. Whole village was destroyed, was torched. And on the right is a freedom fighter, Bimal Pramanik. But then 1990 and 92, there were attacks on him. He fled to India. The picture is on of that. Of course, there are testimonies there also of Shahryar Kobi, whom we interviewed, we know very well. On the right, we have Fahim Reza Noor and Selim Reza Noor. Their father was murdered by Pakistan Army, and they were telling, they were very young, but they still remembered this. At my home, poet Shamsur Rahman came, and after that he wrote a beautiful story, not story, a poetry. So he came to our home in in New York in early 90s. And this is during 1992 program, we see hundreds of eyewitness. Many of the crematoriums were destroyed, Shoshans. This happens to be in Sylhet, but I saw also in Dhaka, Kumilla, and Chittagong. And lastly, this is very recently, last year, Bangladesh government honored them in Jatibhanga. These 3,800 women were made widows on 23rd April. And as you can see, I'm so, what should I say? Glad that Bangladesh government honored and came to help these people who lost their husbands. I'm so sorry. And on the left is, of course, you know it all. And we know the flag is flying so high. It should always do. There's the last one, and there's some information here. If anybody needs, they can contact. Thank you for inviting me. If anybody has any question, I'll be later on, not now. Thank you. Thank you very much. And that's the end of my presentation. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. By mistake, I have this thing is ISPAD. I misprinted double S. Indian Subcontinent Partition Documentation Project, which many of people have visited. Hundreds of people we have interviewed. If any of you are ever to New York, I'll be happy to take your interviews, a testimony. Thank you.
We are expecting Professor Imtiaz to say something. He's moderating the session. Is he there?
I was mute. Professor Dastida, we'll come back to you maybe later during the Q&A.
Sure.
We now, Mr. Ghaffar Chaudhry. Do we have Ghaffar Bhai here?
He's not yet. We can
Ghaffar
go.
Bhai, are you there?
We can go to the next panelist.
He's not yet. Okay. Let me now. Okay. Let me now invite Dr. Nuzhat Chaudhry. Dr. Nuzhat Chaudhry is the youngest daughter of the martyred intellectual Dr. Alim Chaudhry. And carrying on her father's legacy, she is now an associate professor of ophthalmology at Bangladesh Sheikh Mujibur Rahman Medical University. She is also a PhD candidate at Durham University, and she is very much tied up with this 1971 Hatok Dalal Nirmal Committee, and also the founding cultural secretary of Projonmo Ekaktur, the Generation 71, which was on 1971. With that short intro, Nuzhat, it's all yours.
Just a bit of a correction. I'm not a PhD candidate, and I've just been promoted to professor. But thank you for giving me the floor. So very often in all the academic discussion,
Nuzhat, could I request you to come a little bit more closer to your mic because we can't hear you properly.
Okay. At the onset, I'd like to pay my respect to the father of the nation, Bangladesh Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, our national leaders, Tajuddin Ahmed, Sayyid Islam, 3 million martyrs, and the Biranganas, 200,000 to 400,000 Biranganas, our mothers, the Shohid Jaya, and Mukti Jodhas. I want to pay my respect to all of them. So many times in all this academic discussion, the victim's voice is not heard. So I'm here to say that I'm not going to talk about the pros and cons and the academic parts. It can go on for a long time. But as a human being, that sentence struck me very hard. If we don't get recognition of Bangladesh genocide, it feels like that our fathers' lives don't matter. The lives that were given to get this glorious liberation for Bangladesh, after thousands of years, Bengalis finally have a land to call their own and be masters of that land, but their lives do not matter. such a heinous crime was committed. Yet, after 5 decades, here we are, still proving to the spectators around the globe that it happened. You saw, but it was only in 71 where videos were there, newspapers were there, news clippings are there. You saw part of the video that was taken during the 25th massacre. What more do we need to do to prove that a genocide took place? Not only Hindus, Muslims were killed, Christians were killed, Buddhists were killed, irrespective of the religion. Bengalis were killed because they wanted a land for themselves. So if you don't recognize that genocide, that is still, the faces I see, most of you have families that have been affected by it. Most of you are of the age where you remembered that genocide. And I don't understand. It baffles me why Bangladesh genocide is not recognized. I keep on thinking, is it because Pakistan in that war had the support of the Islamic world, China, and the so-called human rights upholder Western world? Is that it? So for the Western world, for all those who advocate human rights, recognition of Bangladesh genocide is about lobbies and which axis you belong to in 71, who supported you. Cold War, is that it? What is wrong? Why do we have to time and again prove that our fathers were killed? Why do we have to prove my father's mutilated body is shown time and again? Even in this short documentary, there are bodies of the intellectuals. Why do I have to show that picture time and again to prove that such a heinous crime was committed? Why? Why is the world so generous for other genocides, but so hard on us? When I went to UK to get support for our war crimes tribunal, I felt victimized all over again. You know why? Because there is capital punishment in Bangladesh. I didn't ask anyone to be hanged. All I asked was a justice. After 4 decades, we got justice, and people, human rights activists, stood on the side of the perpetrators because the law of the land gives capital punishment. So I felt victimized all over again. I feel victimized every time I need to prove that there was genocide in Bangladesh. I feel victimized every time I see famous human rights activists standing on the side of the Islamic terrorists. If it is your country in the West, they are terrorists, but if they do crime in Bangladesh, they are Islamic scholars. Why is it so? Terrorism is terrorism. Genocide is genocide. Tell me how. One point is there that you can prove that it wasn't a genocide. You can prove that it wasn't there. Every time the 3 million people were killed, I say, and they query me about the number, as if it was 3 people, if it was 3,000 people, it will not be genocide. Genocide is not defined by the number. Genocide is defined by the intent, and the intent was to eliminate Bengalis so that we don't have a free land. You know what they said? They raped women so that they will change our genetics, our DNA. They will change how we look. So you know it all. But every time we talk about it, you will stand on the side of the perpetrator because he's being hanged. What about our right? What about my human right? Nobody speaks about that. The West still is standing on the side of the perpetrator. Islamic Ummah, what Ummah? What Islamic Brotherhood? You killed my father, he was a devout Muslim. I'm a practicing Muslim. Where's my justice? And why would religion be a factor when you decide whether you should support or not? How can anybody with an ounce of humanity in them stand on the side of the perpetrators? I don't understand. I don't understand why after 50 years, we still need to prove that there was a genocide in Bangladesh. You know why we need recognition? Because we need to know that our lives also matter as much as those Western lives, those Islamic lives, Chinese lives, Pakistani lives. Our lives also matter. There has to be healing. I'm a doctor. You know, if there's a scar, if there's a cut, you need to stitch it up. We need to heal. You need to pay the respect for the deceased by honoring them, by recognizing that they existed, that such a crime was, that such a crime was caused against them. And you know why recognition should be there? So that somewhere around the world again, your son doesn't fall in a pit like my father at the hands of somebody who wasn't taught what genocide is. See, look at Balochistan. Balochistan would never happen. The genocide in Balochistan would never happen if the Pakistani generals were tried.
21 hours.
If the Pakistan was, yes.
Just 1 minute. This is 9 p.m. We have a 1 minute silence throughout Bangladesh. Just 1 minute. Thank you very much. Please continue.
The reason why we need to recognize, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
The reason why we need to recognize all genocides, irrespective of which lobby they belong to, which axis they belong to, who are the murderers, because so that we can protect our children and future generations from such heinous crimes, so that we can protect them from becoming perpetrators like Niazi or Hitler or someone like that, so that they know better and the world is a better place. And at the same time, I hope and pray that everybody around the world supports us in our war criminals trial process, in our effort to get recognition. At the same time, Pakistan should apologize. The first step is that Pakistan recognize what they have done, and they apologize to us. And there are many unresolved issues between Bangladesh and Pakistan before their Muslim brotherhood and before their Muslim ummah can be of any meaning to anybody here. So I ask the International Committee and all the expatriates who are listening, please support our cause, please support our war criminals trial process, please help us get recognition of Bangladesh genocide, please help us to get apology from Pakistan. I cannot believe in a country there's not a single person who has the humanity to accept their fault and be gracious enough to ask for an apology, and it has to be an official one. So I hope that in 10 more years, again, in another of such webinar, I don't have to come and ask for recognition of my father's killing, of our genocide, and I don't have to ask for an apology, that we will be a better world and we will give Bangladesh genocide recognition so that we do not let any more Rohingya crisis to be there, Balochistan to be there. This is 21st century. We should be better than this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Chaudhary. I'm sorry, my office had a old CD of yours, so let me get at them after it's over. But I'm really sorry for that. But thank you very much for making us believe in ourselves and believe in the human element that is so important. And thank you very much. Our next speaker, let me have the honor to invite Professor Joanne D. Giorgio Lutz. She's a professor of political science and department, and also department head of liberal studies at Texas A&M University. She teaches courses on comparative genocide, and I guess that's one of the credentials. She's definitely here to speak her mind. And one of her similar work is an edited volume on women and genocide. With that very short intro, Professor Lutz, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. And let me thank the conference organizers, the Bangladesh High Commission in London and the Center for Genocide Studies at the University of Dhaka for putting together this amazing program that brings recognition to the 1971 Bangladesh genocide and actually to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the genocide. I'm really humbled to be here and share some of my thoughts with you. Many of my comments have already been expressed, but I really think they bear repeating. And it's also a way for me to express my solidarity with the Bangladeshi people. As you all know, the Bangladesh genocide is often referred to as the forgotten genocide. And many of you are familiar with the expression in relation to Gary Bass's 2013 book, The Blood Telegram, Nixon, Kissinger, and a Forgotten Genocide. In this work, Bass meticulously unpacks the Nixon administration's support for Pakistan and the US's blatant disregard for the violence and atrocities that were committed against the Bengali people. He does this, of course, through the lens of the telegram sent by Archer Blood on April 6, 1971, and also signed by 20 members of the US diplomatic staff that expressed their outrage over the Nixon administration and the moral bankruptcy of the United States for its silence. The world also can't say that they didn't know, because the Pakistani journalist Anthony Mascarenhas, I'm brutalizing his name, published reports in the Sunday Times of London beginning in June 1971, giving eyewitness testimony to the atrocities that were being committed. Also, Cindy Schamberg of the US journalist also began documenting these types of atrocities. So we can't say we didn't know. Unfortunately, the genocide is forgotten in other ways because it's largely absent from many North American universities and classes, especially on comparative cases of genocide. If anyone peruses academic syllabi, they generally reserve classroom instruction on comparative genocide to units that are focused on Armenia, the Holocaust, Rwanda, maybe Cambodia, along with Darfur. So academic neglect of this genocide from our curriculum continues to perpetuate its status as a foreign genocide, a forgotten genocide. Even René Le Marchand's 2011 edited work on forgotten genocides, oblivion, denial, and memory failed to provide academic space to Bangladesh among this collection of neglected mass atrocities that were committed in the 20th century. Yet the facts of this genocide, as you know, are indisputable. And they meet the legal definition of the Genocide Convention. With the intent, we can definitely demonstrate the intent to destroy in whole or in part. This is clearly documented. 3 million killed, 10 million who fled and became refugees, the destruction of the political and intellectual people, the elites, and the approximately 200,000 to 400,000 women who were subjected to sexual violence, and the consequences on the lives of these women as a result of that trauma that they experienced. It's also forgotten for what is not remembered, for what is silenced, namely the voices of women and their wartime experiences. My own work these days is looking at women in genocide and their representation in genocidal memorials and how that speaks to women's experiences. Women's voices and their memories need to be heard. They need to be heard because the inclusion of women provide a more complete narrative of the genocidal experience. War and genocide are not gender neutral. And the international recognition of this genocide should be inclusive of women. What women experienced, what they endured, is profoundly different from men, and what they remember is not identical. The inclusion of women's voices and their narratives requires a larger narrative that includes accounts of sexual violence, but also women's experiences preceding the events of Operation Searchlight. What did they anticipate? What did they do in the days leading up to the start of the war? So what were women experiencing at this time? Why did some flee and others not? Those who fled, what was those conditions like? What was it like living as a refugee? What did they witness during the war? What resources did they utilize to survive? How did they navigate a wartime terrain that targeted the family, the feminine, as an assault on the larger group? Did they have social, religious, or other networks beyond the confines of family that they could draw on? And then how did they cope with the constant fear that many must have felt, the psychological stress that they would have endured, along with the physical pain that they also experienced? And especially we need to hear from women who became widows and had to navigate an environment in which they now had to provide for themselves and their children. And to complete the narrative, we need to examine the post-war context. How and in what ways did they rebuild their lives in a post-genocidal society that preferred to silence women's voices and opted for peace over justice and accountability? We know that women many of them led sheltered lives, and so these women, then their lives became shattered and women were defenseless. So we also have to ask, how can women who are victims of sexual violence move from being considered a victim to a survivor, especially when the state and society silences gender violence? Women's identity is often tied to cultural norms relative to their state of chastity, and culture shapes identity across a trajectory of values. So if women self-identify as having experienced sexual violence, they place themselves at risk for being stigmatized, blamed for shaming their families, in addition to suffering discrimination. So in effect, women are pressured to remain silent. This, in effect, really leads to a form of double victimization. So not only were they victims of gendered violence, but they're also victims in silence by a state narrative and the societal structures that prefers to keep their experiences unknowable. What about their inclusion in memorialization efforts? Are they visible in remembrance? And if so, in what context? We all know the fallout from the war and the genocide. It's well documented and it's extremely tragic. Susan Brown Miller in the 70s actually told of the women who became pregnant due to rape, the unwanted children born of rape, and in many cases leading to self-administered abortion, suicide, infanticide. Doctors from Planned Parenthood documented multiple cases of venereal diseases among women. And we know the stories of young unmarried rape victims who were rendered unmarriageable. And despite the attempt by the government in 1972 to refer to these women as heroines, thus rehabilitating women, not society, right? These were short-lived tropes for this idea of a modern new nation with modern ideals. And so soon afterwards, women's experiences vanished from public discourse. Again, women themselves refuse to identify as rape victims because of the fear and the stigma of discrimination. The trauma for women never ended. So when privileged memories are allowed to prevail, memories that exclude the voices of women and their understanding of the genocide, their meaning and understanding of the impact of sexual violence against women, the totality of their experience, then the state creates a narrative moving forward that is not a narrative of the people and inclusive of a narrative of a new nation, but one that identifies the 1971 genocide, as Dr. Yasmin Saikia calls, a loss of humanity. And she eloquently notes, quote, "Women's memories make us deeply aware of their resilience to come to terms with the past, to move forward and engender a new future," unquote. Lastly, remembering the Bangladesh genocide reminds us that the world's response, their action or inaction, is most often determined by geopolitical concerns. That is, the national interest of both superpowers and regional powers alike set the course of whether they act or not, whether they recognize or not. And Bangladesh is a case in point, with India and her allies recognizing the genocide while Pakistan and its allies refused to do so. Also, the Bangladesh genocide once again reminds us of the difficulties to maintain attention to particular cases of genocide for any sustained period of time. Once the war ended, the new state emerges, Bangladesh is forgotten. And so, but it's through the continued efforts to commemorate, to remember the victims, to acknowledge the suffering that will ensure that it does not fade from memory. On March 16th of this year, Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez submitted a resolution to the 117th session of the US Congress. The resolution congratulated the people of Bangladesh on the 50th anniversary of the country's independence, hailing the courage of the valiant freedom fighters in the struggle for freedom and democracy. Unfortunately, there was no mention of the G word. The resolution has been referred to the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. So while congratulating on your independence, it failed to recognize and acknowledge that a genocide took place. And I would have probably expected more from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So when countries like the United States lack the moral courage to call what transpired in Bangladesh a genocide, when they fail to call for accountability, what then? How to work for recognition? Well, I would say keep raising your voices. As Dr. Jahan noted, we need to teach about this genocide. And as Dr. Ahmed said, it needs to be part of the curriculum. Academics need to speak up and collaborate more. Flood the academic journals, flood the conferences with awareness of this genocide. Also, memorialization efforts keep memory alive. It also provides a form of symbolic transitional justice. Collective and individual memory matter. The construction of memorials provide visual reminders of the genocide, not just in Bangladesh, but worldwide. Memory museums document atrocities. They serve to educate the visitors both in person and now virtually. And museums should not just be confined to Bangladesh. Wherever there are these communities worldwide, we should be erecting monuments and museums. Also, we need to make use of social media as an educative tool and to break this silence. I'm reminded of what, during the Rwandan genocide, what US National Security Advisor Anthony Lake told delegations of Rwandans who were flooding his office for the United States to intervene and do something. And he told them, make noise. And I think that's what's going to keep this on that agenda and keep up that struggle for recognition. Publications need to have reach. So yes, you have the documentation, the YouTube channels are there, but to promote justice and accountability and to get that recognition, that those publications have to have reach. So I really commemorate you on your efforts to keep this genocide alive. And I try to do my part in my humble ways here at my own university and in my classes on genocide to include, of course, to include modules on the Bangladeshi genocide and other forgotten genocides. And I really thank you for this opportunity to just share a few of my thoughts with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Joanne, and thank you for giving almost a kind of a slogan, make noise. I think that's very important, unless we make noise, and I mean at every level, one should make noise, the media, the academicians, the researchers, the students, the human rights activists, in Bangladesh, in Dhaka, in Delhi, in New York, in Tokyo, everywhere. And I think that's how, I guess, we need to work. It's quite a big work, I understand, but I'm sure with the collective effort, we can overcome the problems that we are now facing. Our next speaker is a good friend of mine, Professor Yasmin Saikia, and she is currently the Nikachos Chair in Peace Studies at the Center for the Study of Religion and Conflict, and a Professor of History in the School of Historical, Philosophical, and Religious Studies at Arizona State University. Her work focuses on the histories of memory and identity, women, war, and peace. She is the author of the award-winning book Fragmented Memory, and also later Women, War, and the Making of Bangladesh, Remembering 1971. Yasmin, it's all yours.
Thank you for inviting me to be part of this amazing group, Your Excellency, the High Commissioner for Bangladesh in London, Imtiaz Ahmed, and the other scholars and commentators who are here today to discuss about 1971. Some of you, of course, know the war and its effect firsthand, and I'm humbled to be in your presence. However, no amount of talking about 1971 can redress the sufferings of the victims. Nonetheless, we hope by meeting, dialoguing, and sharing, we will begin to understand each other and empower the struggle for justice and peace in the subcontinent. Let me state at the outset that there is no unblemished telling of the Bangladesh War of Liberation. Bangladesh calls it genocide. India packages it as a humanitarian crisis, and Pakistan denies to even discuss 1971. Moving away from the national sources, I have searched inside the lives of the people who suffered violence and perpetrated violence in the war. The trail of personal memories for building evidence and piecing together the sequence of events and violent actors is not easy. The perpetrators came in many different guises, as victims reveal. Also, there is the question of time. To outsiders, the entire period of the war is a single monstrous time of 9 months from March 25th to December 16th, 1971. For those who suffered violence, it's a unique individual experience. It is a frozen time. Another significant problem is silencing. Fear, shame, trauma, loss of respect and honor, and a host of personal and social reasons create sparsity. Those who tell have difficulty in recalling the extreme suffering. They want to forget and move on with their lives. In the war, armed combatants terrorized the vulnerable, and in the process, both victims and perpetrators were ruined. The capacity to tell of this loss recuperates survivors' humanity, disappearing hostile national boundaries. This is not the history of the war that Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India record. It is an unclaimed human story told by survivors. I have worked on the rape of women more specifically in the war, but I have found that it is very poorly documented in Bangladesh. Generally, Pakistanis are blamed, while the actions of Bengali men who violated Bengali and Bihari women remain unanalyzed. Pakistan, on its part, denies the occurrence of rape in the war, as if it had not happened. Although Bangladesh claims 200,000 as rape victims, we find that the victims are generally invisible, and this has already been discussed by the previous presenters. For the women, the perpetrators were many: Pakistani soldiers, Bihari and Jamaat-e-Islami supporters, Muslim leaguers, as well as Bengali neighbors and friends. The enemy was all around, and inside East Pakistan, women recall. Here I actually bring a 76-year-old Bihari woman called Sakina Begum. Of course, I have changed the names, who now lives in Saidpur refugee camp, who summed it up beautifully for me. Men raped women. What does it matter? What was their ethnic, religious, or linguistic background? Insaniyat, humanity had died. Is this something to talk about? Women do not use the word rape, but replace it with other terms like abduction, marriage, and visit. They describe it as a state of unconsciousness. Halima Parveen is one of the many victims. She lives in Jashore, and again, her name is changed, of course. She recalled that enthused by the political fervor of liberation, she participated in 2 ambushes, but was apprehended in the 3rd ambush. Bengali men who arrested her raped her in a police station and handed her over to the Pakistani soldiers. After liberation, Halima was not acknowledged by the Bangladesh state as a Mukti Jodha. Rather, she and her friends were stigmatized and driven out of their villages and deleted from the collective memory of friends, neighbors, and community. It is not only women, but their families too suffered. Laila tells a poignant story of this uneasy relationship in remembering her father who was killed, but her mother and brothers pretended they were not his family in fear of retribution of the Pakistani soldiers. Disclaiming association with the vulnerable bodies of women and deceased members of the family was sometimes a way to stay alive. Perpetrators and victim become blurred in such situations. Zebunisa, an elderly Bihari woman who now lives in Karachi, Pakistan, provided the most poignant testimony of the dehumanized person. In 1971, after her husband was killed, she had to stay in a jail before repatriation to Pakistan, which became official after the Shimla Agreement in April 1973. However, one morning, Zebunisa found that two of her daughters had died of hunger. Unable to pay for their funeral, she allowed the jail authorities in Khulna to throw away their bodies. In a quiet voice, she told me they were human, but they were thrown away like garbage. The West Pakistani soldiers who were brainwashed into believing they were killing Hindus forgot that the people of East Pakistan were fellow citizens. To understand how and why ordinary men became rapists and killers during the war, we need to listen to them. However, only a few divulge their actions and tell chilling tales of the degradation of the human. Hamid was an ordinary soldier in 1971 and is currently employed as a security guard in Lahore. Lieutenant Colonel Nader Ali was a major. He took early retirement in 1972 and only passed away last year, or this year actually. When I met Hamid, he told me he obeyed the commands of his officers and performed his duty without asking questions. He talked about looting and plundering Bengali homes and villages and even admitted that he stood guard when the officers raped women. However, he confessed, my Zamir conscience would not let me commit such a crime. Colonel Ali was perhaps the most outspoken voice. He recalled, quote, before the war, the West Pakistanis treated East Pakistan as their colony or their holiday resort where everything was permissible to them. Most people in the war had no idea what they were fighting against. We were blind. On July 15th, I carried out a guerrilla operation across the Indian border. BBC reported that 56 people were killed. I was very proud and everyone congratulated me. A few weeks later, I slipped into madness. War is madness. I was recommended for a gallantry award. You have to be an SOB to get an award for killing ordinary people. When I was inside the machine called the army, I was a part of it. Now I know better, but I don't talk about it. The biggest problem to deal with it is the emptiness, unquote. Colonel Ali's voice illuminates, however obliquely, a truth that state, nation, and territory had replaced the human person in the war. Likewise, Bongo Bir Kadir Siddiqui discussed with me his deep remorse of killing several Bihari Rajakars on December 19, 1971. He regretted his action because, as he said, quote, the Bangladesh state is more corrupt and our leaders far more dangerous than the supporters of the Pakistan were. In the dark places of the human loss, Colonel Ali and Kadir Siddiqui, who also has passed away, learned the responsibility to transcend the confines of ethnicity and nationalism. They found humanity in the other. This is the story that national history cannot speak. It is not enough to blame individual Pakistanis, Bengalis, and Biharis for the crimes they committed in the war. We have to investigate the leaders, Yahya Khan, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, Indira Gandhi, and of course, Bongo Bondhu Mujibur Rahman too, because they pushed narrow agendas of nationality and personal ambitions, perhaps, for destroying the shared sense of a historical past of the people of the subcontinent. I will not go into details here, but I have to ask, could the violence have been averted if the leaders did not opt for a military solution? Even today, the bitter effects of 1971 serves as a reason for revenge among the post-colonial nation states of India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. One of the most glaring problems is the condition of the Bengali Muslims in present-day Assam in India. They are reduced to illegal immigrants and threatened with expulsion because they're deemed Bangladeshi. The survivors of 1971, however, offer us a different language of insaniyat, manobikota, or humanity, and ask us to search for its loss in the debris of the violence. The people of Bangladesh, who suffered incredible losses in 1971, can lead the way with the moral courage of survivors because they know firsthand the danger of devaluing life for destroying and killing. A new humanity needs to rise from Bangladesh and lead the subcontinent to peace, because we, the people of the subcontinent, deserve better. Thank you. That is all I want to say for today.
Thank you very much, Professor Yasmin. We will definitely get back to you if we have time for the Q&A. Let me now have the honor to invite Professor Mizanur Rahman, the former chairman of Bangladesh Human Rights Commission. Currently, he's heading this Bangladesh Institute of Law and International Affairs. He's a professor also of Dhaka University, professor of Faculty of Law. Professor Mizan, is all yours.
Thank you, Professor Imtiaz. With my deepest homage and respect to the victims of genocide in 1971, let me make a very brief presentation. But at the outset, let me just say that when we talk about genocide, bringing in the polemics and the politics of 1971 is of no use. I think that does more damage than help the cause of seeking international recognition of Bangladesh genocide in 1971. So I'll not respond to the issues raised by my previous speaker, with many of which I am totally in discord. However, I will just approach the question from a legalistic perspective and try to analyze why this international recognition is necessary. Ladies and gentlemen, the international resolve after 1945 was nunca más, never again. The horrors of genocide, the atrocities committed during the Second World War. But that remained a hollow promise. Nunca más, but always is fine that genocidal acts and genocidal crimes recur and continue recurring in various parts of the globe. So the question that creeps up in our mind is humanity cursed? Is humanity always to fall prey to bigotry and to genocidal crimes? Is this our destiny? Well, I don't know whether it's destiny or not, but as a student of law and international law, I believe that this kind of genocidal crimes can be averted. Let me just quote the chief prosecutor in Nuremberg, Justice Robertson, when he says, and let me quote, "Crimes against humanity will only be deterred when their would-be perpetrators, be they political leaders, field commanders, or soldiers and policemen, are given pause to the prospect that they will henceforth have no hiding place, that a legal nemesis may someday, somewhere overtake them," unquote. So if this is the departing point, I'm pretty sure that genocidal crimes can be averted. We talk of genocide when it is already too late, when the crime has already been committed. But the question is not to talk after people have suffered, but whether we can avert the kind of atrocities that we call genocide in international law. According, let me just draw a parallel from a very old case, the SS Lotus case decided by the Permanent Court of International Justice back in 1927. In the decision of the Lotus case, the court mentions inter alia, and again I quote, "The genocide committed," I'm just drawing the parallel, "genocide committed by Pakistani forces do not simply fall within the scope of any municipal law, but are subject to an international criminal order to which the notions of frontiers and extradition rules arising therefrom are completely foreign," unquote. So that brings that genocide in Bangladesh in 1971 is an international crime. And if it is an international crime, the response has to be international. And for an international response, there has to be recognition of the international community. Back in 1972, the International Commission of Jurists found the rampant commission of genocidal crimes in Bangladesh and recommended the formation of an international tribunal to prosecute these crimes and punish the perpetrators. And I think this is where lies the problem, that why, after even 50 years, the genocide in Bangladesh has not been recognized, because we did not follow the instruction of the International Commission of Jurists. They wanted an international tribunal to be established. But what Bangladesh did, we went for International Crimes Tribunal, which is a domestic tribunal. And this is very parted with the colonial masters, their wishes, their aspirations. They left the subcontinent, but they are still with their colonial hangover, and they wanted to be participants and actively participate in whatever we do about the genocidal acts committed in Bangladesh. And since we established a tribunal all by ourselves, we created the norms and we created the rules of prosecuting international crimes, and we were 25 years ahead of the international community. What we did in 1973, the international community did only in 1998 through the Rome Statute. And that is what is the fault of Bangladesh, why we were ahead of the international community. Why did we progress so much? Why did we have the courage to establish a tribunal to prosecute international crimes? And so Bangladesh is punished by not being recognized by the international community for the crimes which are committed against the innocent people of Bangladesh. So recognition, even if there is recognition in the international community, probably in all likelihood that would fall in under soft international law. But nonetheless, it would carry huge moral and ethical value. And why? Let me just name a few reasons why I think that we need to have this international recognition. Number one, universal jurisdiction with respect to international crimes creates an international obligation for states to prosecute such crimes. But in the absence of recognition, it is easier to avoid such liability, which the international community is avoiding right now. Secondly, the fundamental postulate of criminal jurisprudence that crimes must not and criminals must be taken to book. But without recognition, criminals continue to live in a comfort zone, especially those who are living in Pakistan or elsewhere in the world. Three, justice for victims of genocide demands that due punishment be inflicted on perpetrators. It is not only a question of law, but it is also a question of morality. Number four, non-recognition of Bangladesh genocide is the breeding reason of genocidal acts elsewhere. During the fascism during the Second World War, Hitler, he summoned his commanders and told, go and do this, and let me tell you that people are going to forget it, and so nobody's going to remember. But if we remember, if we continue talking about the genocide, if we continue to remember 1971, then nobody's going to forget it. And that is the way that we can prevent future genocides from occurring and taking place. Number five, the international community must move from a culture of reaction to a culture of prevention. And this requires recognition of past atrocities. When we recognize past atrocities, only then we can resolve that let it not happen again. We are not going to permit that again. And only then nunca más becomes real and not something of a rhetoric only. Number 6, it is an accepted truth that there can be no political compromise on legality and accountability for crimes committed. For this to happen, recognition is again necessary. The next, recognition is needed for perpetrators and their family members to relieve themselves from psychological trauma. Several studies and researches have shown that the perpetrators, they have severe psychological trauma. The committed crimes haunt them like anything. So until and unless they, and it was, I'm happy that Professor Imtiaz remembered and recalled Desmond Tutu. As a matter of fact, in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, it was found that only after someone has unveiled the whole story, has told before the commission what kind of atrocities and crimes he has committed against the Black community, only then they were at peace with themselves. Only then they said, at least now I can live my life as a normal human being, because I feel that a huge burden has been shed off from my shoulders. This is what recognition. This is what confession does. And therefore, when the perpetrators are punished, when the perpetrators have gone through the process of law and accountability, only then they can live a normal life for themselves. And not only them, this is even necessary for those of the the offsprings of the perpetrators. My previous speaker talked about some Pakistan military officers and others and Biharis, victims as well as perpetrators. Now you see, if you are a perpetrator and if you are dead, but your sons and daughters continue living, they continue living with indignity. And living with indignity is a punishment that is inflicted on a person. Well, this daughter or the son never committed genocide. Probably it's their father, it's their uncle. But until and unless this is done, justice is done, until and unless accountability is ensured, until and unless there is, a kind of legal process leading to, prosecution of genocidal acts, even the offsprings, the succeeding generations, they cannot live with peace with themselves. So even for them, it is necessary that genocide must be prosecuted. This must have recognition. So the recognition of Bangladesh genocide in 1971, I think, is more of a question of legitimacy of international legal order. If international legal order demands and talks about any legitimacy, then it must be shown that it is legitimate. It is legitimate to pursue the perpetrators of genocide. It is legitimate and the system is legitimate. Therefore, it does not spare anyone, whether it is from the north or from the south. This is the truth that needs to be established in order to establish the legitimacy of the international legal order. Until that is done, we will probably say that justice is still far away from the people who need it most. So for justice sake, the recognition of Bangladesh genocide in 1971 is indispensable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Mizan, for giving us almost pointers as to why international recognition is required. And more importantly, that when you have a genocide, by definition, it becomes international. Genocide is never national. And that's precisely the reason I think our High Commissioner also in the very beginning was talking about the genocide in Myanmar. It's not a national issue. It's by definition, it becomes international, where we also see a kind of politics that is now currently going on. We don't have the first speaker, unfortunately, could not join us for health reasons. He informed us. So we are not going to have Mr. Abdul Ghaffar Chaudhry. I would have loved to hear him, but his health condition is not allowing him to join us today. We have a final speaker instead, Mr. Sultan Mahmood Sharif. He's a member of Bangladesh Liberation War Overseas Freedom Movement in the UK, and also a member of Action Committee Stop Genocide Movement at Trafalgar Square back in 1971. Mr. Sharif, the platform is yours.
Thank you for asking me to participate in your discussion. I am slightly bewildered to hear one of the contributor speaking from what I don't know, but creating an atmosphere where the perpetrators have also some reason to explain why they are perpetrators. And it's unfortunate, it is disgusting, and naturally, I am very sorry to say that this should not be a course where we are trying to speak about a genocide. I, for one, was able to live through that 71, the whole period, with the freedom fighters, the victims, and the families of the victims in Bangladesh and in the surrounding camps, in Indian camps, and all around throughout the entire 9 months, and have faced and seen and the sorrow, the suffering, the punishment through which the families have gone during the Liberation War, and the insult, injustice that was perpetrated on the Bengali people. It is not only Hindu or Muslim. I went to one area where people told me, they were asked, are you a relation of Sheikh Mujib? They were looking for a relation of Sheikh Mujib so that they can kill him. They were a relation for a mother who helped some freedom fighter to flee and kill her. While a country goes through for whole 9 months in a situation, then someone comes up and say the victims had some excuse. It's unfortunate and disgusting. I'm coming to all these things by saying that in 50 years we could not get these perpetrators to punishment is for the hegemony of the big powers, because in that killing of my millions of people who were lost, and 300,000 people who were people who were murdered inside the country, and millions, more than 1 million people who were subject to insult and abuse and had to leave their home and hearth. If someone talks about that in a way as if it can be compared with anything else, it is disgusting and unfortunate. I use that word disgusting once again, because no one should be allowed to try to compromise the sorrow, the feeling, and the unfortunate condition of the living. There are hundreds and thousands of families who are still living with the memory of murder, mayhem, insult, abuse of all sorts by the Pakistani army, including its General Tikka Khan and the whole lot of Niazi and everyone and Yahya. When this was being done, after 50 years, when someone comes and somebody tries to compromise that, it's hated, disliked by entire humanity. In that 9 months of war, everywhere all over the world, I have gone and persuaded people to support the suffering people of Bangladesh. The whole world, the good thinking people, the right thinking people, the honest people, the general people of the world were with us. The American administration with Nixon and Kissinger, or the Chinese administration with Mao Zedong and his people, or for that matter, the Arab bootlickers were supporting the Pakistani regime. After even 50 years, we have not been able to bring conscience in them. We have not been able to bring into their children the thought that their fathers, their forefathers were bloody criminals, and criminals to that extent. We loathe them because they have killed our women, our brothers, our children, our mothers, and played with the dead body of our people. If you remember Sakaripatti, where one of the nights in Dhaka, they went and from 6th floor, 5th floor of the buildings, they threw away children, women, babies, and killed them. And those people, when we ask that they should be tried, they should be punished, and for eternity, the Bengalis should stand up and say, until that punishment is done, Bengalis will never forgive them. And no member of humanity who is a human being of any human sense, or who has any dignity, or love for life, or love for living, or living being, can condone these criminals or find excuse for them. Is very unfortunate for a country, for the whole world. Today, maybe in 15 years, of which 29 years these criminals were running Bangladesh, we have not been able to put them, account for them, punish them, and bring them to books to everybody who care in this nation's world, all over the world, who would like to see these perpetrators being killed. It is not an excuse that it is 50 years that this crime has been committed. It cannot be an excuse. Everybody should pay for his punishment. If you have killed one person, and if you are punished to death for that, there is nothing wrong in that, because you are a criminal. You are a psychopath. A psychopath has no right. The Pakistani nation has proved that they are harboring those psychopaths up till now, and those who are their children and cohorts are shamefully not fit to live in this world where I would like to see people to live. I would like to see the coming world to live. I would like to see my grandchildren to live. I have survived that war. That does not mean I will be willing to compromise with those killers. Pakistan should be punished, and in America and everywhere who supported this crime, this heinous crime, for long 9 months. Every day Mrs. Gandhi was going around to tell the whole world that the Bengalis everywhere are being murdered every minute, every second, and millions of them are being perished. Those who did not pay heed to that, they have committed a crime to humanity. The human race will never forgive them. Today, whatever you say, it may be delayed. Justice may be delayed. Dignity has been totally destroyed during those periods. So any law that compromises with punishment for such people is unfortunate. Thank you for organizing this discussion, but to bring people who do not understand, who may not have lost anybody in his or her family, or has not been insulted, punished, whether it is a boy or it is a girl, it is an old man or it is a young man or it is a child. They insult people who have not suffered that insult will never understand because they don't want to understand. And I say that the psychopaths and their children are not fit to live in this world with ordinary people. And I believe that we should, all over the world, we should all raise our voice against this apologists, whoever he is and whatever he has committed, whatever heroism he may have shown during the Liberation War. It's unfortunate that I had a docket from Barishal who broke the jail, and during the whole 9 months, he was participating in the Liberation War. At the end of the 9 months, when the liberation was over, he was supposed to go back to jail. He ran and went and killed the man who put him into jail before the Liberation War. And then he was put in jail where he ended. These people who think that they will escape, they will not escape the fate of the human race. I thank you for organizing it, and I thank you, Munna, thank Munna, our High Commissioner, for organizing and allowing me to vent my feeling. I feel that Mizanur Rahman Chaudhry, Mizan Rahman has put a lot of points into the legality as it stands today. And Professor Ranak Jahan and others who have spoken have amply spoken about the movement which should now be initiated by everybody to ensure that the people who have done this horrible acts are brought to book, punished, living or dead, or their name should be known to everybody. These are the people who have committed this heinous crime, and their children and their people and their grandchildren and great-grandchildren should know they were in history like Mir Jafar of the world or Robert Clive of the world. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Jai Bangla.
Thank you, Mr. Sharif, for putting some of the facts very openly and very correctly, I would say. Thank you very much for your point-blank words. We now have, we ran out of time though, long back, but we want to continue a little bit because see some hands and also some responses. So we'll have a short Q&A. Let me invite Her Excellency, the High Commissioner first.
Yes, thank you. Professor Ahmed. I would like to place on record my gratitude to Mr. Sultan Sharif for, he said he vented out. Actually, this is, what he did is, you introduced him as a member of the Action Committee. He was a student in London in 1971, and there were many students in London, Bengali students, British students, Irish students, Indian students, and perhaps even Pakistani students, I don't know. But they all protested at Trafalgar Square. Their principal demand was stop genocide in Bangladesh and then release Sheikh Mujib, and number 3 was recognize Bangladesh. Now, I would like to place on record as High Commissioner of Bangladesh an official protest that Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's, I think Professor Saikia said that, all of them, and she mentioned 4 names. Now, I put a protest for placing Bangabandhu's name next to President Yahya Khan or Lieutenant General Yahya Khan, who should be tried just like Milosevic. He is the one who has actually instructed the genocide and systematic blueprint of annihilating the Bengalis and the Hindus and all kinds of minorities on the basis of racial discrimination and deprivation. So Bangabandhu spent 14 years of his political life in prison. He was a Gandhian and he believed in peaceful politics. He had never ordered the murder of anybody. So, and he never compromised with President Yahya Khan. That is why he called the 7th March speech, he called for independence, because he had a democratic mandate to form a government. He would have become the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and that is what the West could not tolerate. A Bengali, of inferior race could become the Prime Minister of Pakistan. So from that perspective, while you mentioned other names, but I would register this protest that you should, we cannot, as Bengalis, place Bangabandhu's name next to Yahya Khan's. We can't even listen to it. This is not something that is acceptable to us as a nation, and we are celebrating the centenary of the Bangabandhu, where we discussed that the Professor Amartya Sen just said that he's not only Bangabandhu, he's Bishwabandhu. He's a friend of the entire world because of the secular values that he believed in. He believed that everybody was equal of all religions, but that was not the case. We Bengalis were murdered, genocided, crimes against humanities were committed against us because we were Bengalis. And I said it in the beginning, because of our race. Now, it could be that some Bihari women were raped, and I have absolute sympathy with them. But at the same time, the geopolitics, and there was geopolitics, but at the same time, we cannot bring Bangabandhu, when he was arrested and taken to Pakistan for 9 months. There was a summary trial that President Yahya Khan was planning for him in August. And there was an international pressure on him not to do that, to release Sheikh Mujib, and that was the protest all about. But Bangabandhu said that even at Fashir Monche, that means at the gallows, I will not compromise on the rights of the Bengali people. You can kill me right here, but I'm Muslim. I only die once. But even if you hang me here, I will say that I'm a Bengali. My country is Bangladesh, and please send my last remains back to Bangladesh. So we cannot compare the two. So I would like to officially put this, but of course, we had a very good academic discussion. But this is non-negotiable and non-compromisable for Bangladesh as a state, for any Bengali who believes in Bengali culture, who believes in Bangabandhu. So with those words, I would like to thank and go back that we had a very nice academic discussion. I would like to especially thank Professor Ronak Jahan, who had actually, guided us academically that how we can get international recognition. I know that today we cannot go to the International Court of Justice, or perhaps we can. Dr. Mizanur Rahman has raised gave some legal guidance, but I had put a question there to all panelists, and I would like to ask what Dr. Nuzhat Chaudhry has said, that when she went to seek justice, she was the one who was victimized. What will we say to her generation? How can she get justice? There are hundreds and thousands of Nuzhat Chaudhrys whose father or mother has faced injustice in 1971. The question is, how can we make their voices heard? And I know that a number of recommendations have come from Professor Juan. Also, there was reflection on Hindu killings by Professor Sachi, and we do take that into recognition. And one thing that I would like to mention, I was ambassador in Thailand and Cambodia for 4 years before coming here. And I did go to the Cambodian Genocide Museum. And we do, if one recommendation that we'd like to bring out from this discourse today is that in Bangladesh, we do need a genocide museum. And when I was ambassador, our Honorable Prime Minister visited Cambodia, and in the program, I included her visit to the Cambodia Museum, and somebody mentioned about it, the Genocide Museum. And it's a very organized museum. It's just on genocide, where we have the 1971 Liberation War Museum. We don't have a genocide memorial or a genocide museum. And if that is the case, and we can ask international researchers to come and actually research the evidences, perhaps that will be helpful. And also, I think another recommendation came apart from a genocide memorial. Yes, we did sign a MOU between the Liberation War Museum and the Genocide Museum, so we can learn from each other. So I think Bangladesh's genocide researchers and the Liberation War Museum can actually, and I'm sure they have, because Mr. Mofidul Islam was supposed to come, but he couldn't join us. But I know that he's done extensive research on it, where he has done comparative narratives on what are the similarities of this kind of genocide. But taking Professor Dr. Ronak Jahan's recommendations and Dr. Mizanur Rahman, from this today's program, we'd like to have a written sort of a summary, and I'd circulate it to everyone so they can put in their ideas, and we'll forward it to the Ministry of Liberation War, because I strongly feel that we should have a genocide museum where we can have, like a Cambodia style, full record of everything. And I do hope that, justice will be served, that, Nuzhat Chaudhry, who represented, she was crying, she was very emotional, and it's only normal that, as Sultan Bhai has said, only the person who suffered can tell that what have they lost and what injustice has been done to them. Her father was blindfolded and murdered just in the Holocaust style, and for them not to get any justice was not fair. So I salute our Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who has initiated the International Crimes Tribunal. We know that, it's a domestic tribunal, and the International Criminal Court statute says that only when domestic tribunals or domestic justice is, after it has been exhausted, if there's no justice received from national context, then you can go to the ICC. But if people like, victims like Nuzhat feels that they should take this case to the ICJ, just like the Rohingya case has been taken there. If there's evidence, I still believe that there is scope to do so. And if there is any, we'd like to consult Dr. Mizan for that and come up with some recommendations from the team. With these words, if there are any more questions, anyone would like to ask anything, I think Mr. Dewan Gaus Sultan, who's a freedom fighter, a valiant freedom fighter of Bangladesh, he wants to say 1 minute, and Sultan Bhai, I'll give you 1 minute, Gaus Bhai, if you want to say something on this occasion. Gaus Sultan Bhai, are you there? You asked for a minute.
You have to allow me to unmute. I
Yes,
can't unmute myself.
We can hear you. You are unmuted.
Thank you. Thank you very much, High Excellency High Commissioner. This is a very serious part of our history. We just passing to the half century of the Black Night that happened in Bangladesh 50 years ago. Since I've got only 1 minute, I'll be trying to be very, very brief. Election was taken place in Pakistan, first time in about 23 years. And the result of election was, it was the responsibility of the administration to execute the result of the election. They ignored it. Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, who was the leader of the majority party, in his speech in 7th March, he said, "Tomra bereke thako, keu tomadere kichu bolbe na." To the army, that you stay in your barracks, no one is going to tell you anything. On the other hand, the president of Pakistan, Yahya Khan, put his old soldiers and forces onto the victorious party to execute a murder and genocide. If anybody wants to investigate of this generation who haven't seen those things, who haven't studied those history, they should do some homework first, find out the facts and figures, and then come up with some new proposal if they think it is humanitarian and humanity will claim it. Just coming from the nowhere, from Blue Moon, and saying something which doesn't go with the history, which doesn't go with the incidents, which doesn't go with the violation of human rights and humanity, which doesn't go with the ordinary democratic principle of national and international law, is totally out of order. And people's homework is always so necessary to come to a seminar like this and say things. I'm very sorry to use my words in that way, but as a freedom fighter who has seen the preface of the things that culminated to this election and the results and the genocide, we still have got those injuries in our mind, in our brain, in our society, in our economy, and everything that we have came across. And we get so hard when we see people without any genuine ground and study and facts and figures wants to undermine that. I'm so sorry that this so wonderful seminar has turned in a way that is so unexpected. And I'll
Thank you, Gazmai.
request everybody. Thank you very much for giving me the minute. I'll ask you everybody to be conscious. Thank you.
With all due respect, all the speakers gave their perspectives, and I think that 50 years into our independence, this is a good forum to discuss these things and to clarify our minds. And I think we have made ourselves clear, and the historical records of that. I just protested one thing, and I think that everybody will agree with me. What I said, that there are 3 politicians who were named from the subcontinent, but the 4th one was not a politician. He was a dictator. He ordered war crimes, and he should have been tried, just the Nuremberg trials. He's the one who ordered it. So there's no scope for comparison. With these words, I want to thank everyone on behalf of Bangladesh High Commission London for participating, and we want to keep in touch with all of them, and particularly Center for Genocide for helping us organize this. And I would like to pass on the floor to Professor Imtiaz Ahmed to conclude today's session. You have the floor.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Just one piece of information. There is now a genocide museum in Bangladesh under the leadership of Professor Muntasir Mamun in Khulna. So I just want to put that on record. So there is now a museum in Khulna, and next time if you come, you can definitely visit. The point, the issue that Saikia was making, this is not the first time I heard. Let me clarify, and then maybe Saikia would also understand, hopefully. You see, genocide and killing of individuals, they're not same. You have a state with the intent to destroy. And so if you put together, I understand you're talking about killing, of Biharis, whatever may be the number, it doesn't matter, because killing is a killing, I understand. But we are here talking about genocide, and we are talking about a genocide trial. If you want to bring the issue of criminal killing that took place in 71, of course, but I don't think this is the platform, and that would be the right, the intellectual integrity that one should have. That should not be the line of thought. And then this is, unfortunately, you're not the first one. I have seen speakers from the West do the same thing. And I had to tell them, then you are not familiar with the word genocide, or you're not familiar with what genocide is all about. So hopefully, with time, we need to understand, because as I say, a lot of people think that there has to be millions of killing. There has to be, 6 million Jews got killed. Every time they will say, oh, 22 million Russians got killed. Your figure is not that high. Now, that's a, absolutely, I would say, lack of knowledge of what the word genocide is all about. You can actually have a genocide even with 10 killing, or even no killing, as I said, because the idea or the whole concept is intent to destroy in whole or in part in 4 categories. And that's precisely the reason why we are saying the Myanmar issue is genocide. And that's the reason why we need to work on 71 genocide. But unfortunately, we have not, and we too are suffering from the Myanmar genocide, with which we are not part to it. But look at Bangladesh. We have, 1.1 million Rohingyas are now in Bangladesh, which is a bigger population than Bhutan. Bhutan's population is only 800,000. But Bhutan was, Bhutan became Bhutan in 60,000 years. But this Bhutan inside Bangladesh became in 3 months. And why would 1.1 million flee?
Percent of their were raped.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Why would they flee Myanmar? What for? So conditions of life, and that's genocidal. That's what I'm saying. Separation of children, that's genocidal. And I can tell you, in future, even Donald Trump one day would be held responsible for the children. He literally allowed them forcibly, I should say, forcibly pushed them to Mexico border. One day, I'm telling you, write it down from me. One day, Donald Trump would be held responsible. This is the sense. And this is where people have to work very hard, because it's not a genocide, it's a human issue. It's not a Bangladesh issue, or it's not an issue of Myanmar today. I've told my Burmese friends that, look, it's not your issue. People have committed genocide. It has to be tried one way or other, so that I think the number of things that Professor Mizanur Rahman pointed out, it makes it very clear why we need to have a genocide trial. It has nothing to do with nationality, nothing to do with ethnicity, nothing to do with religion. It's absolutely as simple as that. I have to tell you that I enjoyed the extraordinary, perceptions and views and comments of all the speakers. I wish we had more time. We wanted to finish at 9:30 exactly, but it's now 10:15. Thank you for all your patience. And I saw more than 100 people still tied up. This was live streamed in Facebook. I'm sure there will be hundreds of people there also listening to us. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It's always a pleasure to work with Bangladesh High Commission. And whoever is working on genocide, please, you're free to come to Center for Genocide Studies, and we work on all genocides. Thank you very much, Professor Anand Jahan, for helping us to set our mind as to why international recognition is required. And I'm sure those who have us, all of us who have heard her, will continue to work diligently. As she was saying, that every line, she never suffered so much in writing a paper, and that tells you that that's the patience that you need, that the kind of academic excellence would be required. But I am not at all worried. As I said, I'm a class 9 student who left my parents, went there. My mother literally was traumatized. She's no longer alive, but throughout her life, she couldn't believe that a class 9 student son could go out of her. She suffered all through her life when she was alive. She was heavily traumatized. But the point that I'm trying to make is I've seen this country, and I'm absolutely blessed, believe it or not, to seeing a country come up. It's something those who are young will not understand. Those who have not been in Bangladesh will not understand. It's an extraordinary. It's almost like a childbirth. Let me tell you that way. A newborn baby when you see in front of you. And I'm really blessed that I was a young student at that particular time, seeing a country come out. And I will end by saying that on the 16th December, when I first saw the flag, Bangladesh flag, from the window of a 3rd or 4th story building, believe it or not, I waited almost for half an hour, just relishing. And absolutely, I thought I was on the top of the world. That's the feeling. And that's precisely the reason why I think Bangladesh is a South Asian exceptionality. I've written on it. We are the only country which is in South Asia. We are the only country which is People's Republic. There's no country in South Asia. There are altogether 5 countries in the world now which are People's Republic. North Korea was the first. They still remain People's Republic. China, of course. Then you have Laos. Then you have Algeria and Bangladesh. These are the 5 countries which are People's Republic. And the reason is a simple one. The military and the people fought together. We were led by a EPR, East Pakistan Rifle Jawan, a soldier, not even an officer. He was the one who led us, and we agreed to whatever he said. That is the relationship which none of the South Asian countries got. This is the only country, and the second exception, of course, is the only country which fought a liberation war in South Asia. People talk about Netaji Subhash Bose, but then the Indian National Army did not win the state. This is the only country in South Asia which fought a liberation war. And so this South Asian exceptionality, I would say, is the reason why we are doing better and why we have crossed Pakistan, as you know, both in the Human Development Index and in GDP already. And in some categories, we are doing better even when it comes to India, particularly in Human Development Index. We just have to read Amartya Sen for that. Now, we can continue this discussion. We'll come back again on different issues. And I'm sure all of you hopefully I'll see you one way or other. But thank you very much. Thank you, Your Excellency. It was extraordinary for you to request us to be a partner, and I'm sure we will continue working with you. And I'm sure all of you who are here will continue working, all of you. And hopefully, the pain and the pangs that Nuzar pointed out, I'm sure one day, I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to overcome, and we can tell the entire world that you need to pursue, and only by pursuing you can, the kind of thing that Joanne was saying, that make noise. This is a small noise, but let's continue making noise as much as possible. Thank you very much. Thank you, all of you.
I would like to
yes, please go ahead and say a few words also. Please go.
I'd like to conclude paying a tribute. This is the centenary of the Bangabandhu, our founding father, without whom we would not have got the Bangladesh as an independent country. And definitely I agree with you, what you said regarding Bangladesh, his very able and visionary daughter, Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who's taken Bangladesh to make Bangladesh one of the fastest growing economies of the world, which Mr. Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of UK, has in his message mentioned this morning, and it will be shown tomorrow. And also His Royal Highness Prince Charles has mentioned that. I would just like to conclude today's program for everyone's information, a message that was given to Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina from Right Honorable Boris Johnson on the occasion of the centenary of the Bangabandhu, where he writes his feelings and comments about Bangabandhu. And it says, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's founding vision of a democratic, free, secular, and inclusive Bangladesh is inspiring. And I hope it will continue to guide Bangladesh during the 50th anniversary celebrations in 2021 and beyond. The UK is a proud partner, etc., and they will continue to work together with Bangladesh for a very prosperous future. This is reflective of the stature that Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman enjoys in the international community. And today, Prime Minister Modi would be in Bangladesh tomorrow. And, we will be celebrating, we have already celebrated our 50th anniversary of our independence and centenary of the Bangabandhu under the theme Eternal Mujib, because Sheikh Mujibur Rahman Bangabandhu will be an eternal spirit, and the 4 principles on which Bangladesh was established will always be upheld as long as pro-independence and pro-1971 people run this country, which is secularism, democracy, Bengali cultural nationalism, and social justice. So a person who has always upheld these values and never compromised on the rights of the Bengalis, and never, ordered anybody's, like I said, he's a peaceful person, and he got the Julie Corey Peace Award. I'd like to pay a special salute and a tribute to our father of the nation and end this session here. Thank you. And I would thank all the panelists. Thank you so much for participating and being patient with us. It is much, much gone beyond our time. Thank you very much.